The bright lights of Madison Square Garden shone down on the stage as Chris Rock walked out to thunderous applause. The famous comedian had been planning this show for months, and tickets had sold out in just minutes. People from all over New York City had come to see him perform his latest comedy routine. Rock grabbed the microphone and looked out at the packed audience. He could see thousands of faces staring back at him, all waiting to laugh. The energy in the room was electric. This was what he lived for, making people forget their troubles and just enjoy themselves for a couple of hours. For the first 30 minutes, Rock delivered his usual style of comedy. He talked about everyday life, relationships, and social media. The crowd laughed loudly at his jokes about dating apps and how people act differently online versus in real life. Everyone seemed to be having a great time. But then Rock's tone started to change. He began talking about politics and famous people. At first, his jokes were mild and general. He made fun of politicians in both parties, getting laughs from different parts of the audience. People were still enjoying themselves, but some could sense that Rock was building up to something bigger. "You know what I find funny about Washington?" Rock said, pacing back and forth on the stage. "All these powerful people pretending their lives are perfect, like their marriages are some kind of fairy tale." The audience chuckled, not sure where he was going with this. Rock paused for a moment, looking around the room with a sly smile on his face. "Take Donald and Melania Trump, for example," he continued. The mention of their names caused a stir in the crowd. Some people cheered, others groaned, and many just waited to see what would come next. Rock went on to describe what he claimed to know about their relationship. He suggested that their marriage was not based on love but on business deals and public image. He acted out scenes of what he imagined their private conversations might be like, using different voices and exaggerated gestures. "I'm telling you, folks," Rock said, his voice getting louder, "this whole thing is like a movie script. Nobody really believes this is real love, right? Come on." The audience's reaction was mixed. Some people laughed nervously while others sat in uncomfortable silence. A few people in the front rows looked shocked at how direct Rock was being about such a personal topic, but Rock was just getting started. He claimed that he had friends in high places who had told him stories about the Trump marriage. He said these sources had described private moments and conversations that painted the relationship as cold and businesslike. "My buddy who works in fancy hotels told me some things," Rock said, winking at the audience. "Let's just say when these two travel, they don't exactly act like newlyweds, if you know what I mean." The comedian then went into a detailed routine about what he imagined their home life to be like. He pretended to be both Donald and Melania, switching back and forth between characters. His impression of Melania showed her as someone who was only interested in fashion and shopping, while his Donald character was obsessed with social media and making deals. "She's probably counting the days until she can write that tell-all book," Rock joked. Chapter 1, How I Survived 20 Years of Fake Smiles. Some people in the audience were laughing hard at Rock's performance, but others were clearly uncomfortable. A woman in the third row got up and left during this part of the show. An older man near the back was shaking his head and frowning. Rock noticed the mixed reactions but kept going. He seemed energized by the controversy he was creating. This was the kind of comedy that would get people talking for weeks. "Look, I'm not making this stuff up," he said, holding up his hands as if to defend himself. "I'm just telling you what everyone in New York already knows. This marriage is about as real as reality TV." The comedian then launched into a story about allegedly seeing the couple at a restaurant in Manhattan. He described how they barely spoke to each other during the entire meal and how Melania spent most of the time on her phone. The waiter told me later that they didn't even order together, Rock claimed. They ate like two strangers who happened to be sitting at the same table. As Rock continued his routine, people in the audience started taking out their phones. Some were recording videos of his performance, while others were already posting about what they were witnessing on social media. Lisa Martinez, an entertainment reporter who was in the audience that night, was frantically taking notes. She knew this was going to be a big story. Rock wasn't just making casual jokes. He was making specific claims about one of the most famous couples in America. The comedian spent another 15 minutes on this topic, adding more details and doing more impressions. He talked about how He thought their public appearances were carefully staged and how their body language always seemed awkward. You ever notice how they stand together in photos? Rock asked, demonstrating what he claimed was their typical pose. It's like they're afraid to actually touch each other. By the time Rock moved on to other topics, the damage was done. The audience was buzzing with excitement and shock. Some people were already sharing videos on their phones, and the clips were starting to spread across the internet. Kevin Brown, a political analyst who happened to be at the show with his wife, immediately understood the potential impact of what he had just witnessed. He knew that Rock's comments would soon reach far beyond the walls of Madison Square Garden. As the show ended and people filed out of the venue, conversations were dominated by Rock's controversial routine. Some fans thought he had gone too far, while others praised him for being willing to say what others wouldn't. "That was incredible," said one young woman to her friend as they walked toward the exit. "He actually said what everyone's been thinking." But not everyone agreed. "I came here to laugh, not to hear gossip about people's marriages," complained an older man to his wife. "That wasn't comedy, that was just mean." Within hours of the show ending, video clips of Rock's performance were everywhere online. Social media platforms were flooded with reactions, opinions, and debates about whether the comedian had crossed a line. The controversy that would consume the news cycle for days had officially begun, and Chris Rock was at the center of it all. The morning after Chris Rock's show, videos of his routine were playing on every news channel across America. Social media was buzzing with millions of people sharing clips and giving their opinions about what the comedian had said. By breakfast time, it seemed like everyone in the country was talking about Rock's claims about the Trump marriage. Inside the White House, Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt was getting ready for what she knew would be a difficult day. She had watched the videos online early that morning and could already see the story growing bigger by the hour. Her phone had been ringing nonstop since 6 in the morning with calls from reporters wanting her to comment on Rock's performance. Leavitt sat in her office with a cup of coffee, reading through news articles and social media posts about the controversy. She could see that the story was not going away anytime soon. Some news outlets were calling Rock's routine brilliant comedy, while others were saying he had gone too far by making such personal attacks. At 9:30, Leavitt walked into the White House briefing room for her daily press conference. The room was packed with more reporters than usual. Camera crews from all the major networks were there, and she could see that many journalists had prepared questions about the Rock situation. For the first 15 minutes of the briefing, Leavitt tried to focus on other topics. She talked about upcoming policy announcements and answered questions about the president's schedule. But she knew that the reporters were just waiting for their chance to ask about Chris Rock. Finally, a reporter from CNN raised her hand. "Karoline, can you comment on Chris Rock's statements about the first family last night?" Leavitt had prepared for this moment. She looked directly at the camera and spoke in a calm, professional voice. "I'm not going to dignify baseless rumors and gossip with a detailed response," she said. "The president and first lady have a strong marriage, and anyone suggesting otherwise is simply wrong." But the reporters were not satisfied with that answer. Another journalist immediately followed up. "But Rock claims he has sources with inside information. How do you respond to those specific allegations?" Leavitt's tone remained steady, but people who knew her well could see that she was getting frustrated. "Comedy shows are not journalism," she replied. "Mr. Rock is an entertainer, not a reporter. He's making jokes for laughs, not stating facts." More questions kept coming. A reporter from Fox News asked if the White House planned to take any legal action against Rock. Someone from the Washington Post wanted to know if the First Lady would be making her own statement. The questions went on for 20 minutes, with Leavitt trying to redirect the conversation to other topics. After the briefing ended, Leavitt walked back to her office feeling unsatisfied with how things had gone. She knew that her brief responses had not put the story to rest. If anything, the reporters seemed even more interested now. Throughout the day, the story continued to grow. News channels were playing Rock's routine over and over again. Talk show hosts were discussing it. Social media influencers were making their own videos about it. The controversy was becoming impossible to ignore. By afternoon, Communications Director Ryan Phillips came to Leavitt's office for an emergency meeting. Phillips had been monitoring the news coverage all day and was concerned about how the story was developing. "This isn't going away," Phillips told her. "We need to decide how we want to handle this. We can either ignore it completely or address it head-on." Leavitt had been thinking the same thing. She had received dozens of interview requests from news programs wanting her to appear and discuss Rock's comments. So far, she had turned them all down, but she was starting to wonder if that was the right strategy. Chief of Staff Amanda Carter joined the meeting to discuss their options. Carter had dealt with celebrity controversies before and knew how quickly they could spiral out of control if not handled properly. "The problem is that Rock made very specific claims," Carter explained. "He didn't just make general jokes. He said he had sources and inside information. People are going to want us to either confirm or deny what he said." The three of them spent an hour discussing different approaches. They could continue to ignore the story and hope it would fade away. They could have the First Lady herself make a statement. Or they could have Leavitt address it more directly. By evening, they had made their decision. Leavitt would hold a special primetime press conference to address Rock's comments directly. It was unusual for a press secretary to call an evening briefing, but they felt the situation required immediate attention. At 8 o'clock that night, Leavitt walked back into the briefing room. This time, the room was even more crowded than it had been that morning. News networks were broadcasting the briefing live, and millions of Americans were watching from home. Leavitt looked directly into the cameras and began speaking in a firm, clear voice. "I want to address the comments made by Chris Rock last night about the President and First Lady," she said. "Mr. Rock's statements were not only tasteless, but completely unfounded." She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. The room was completely silent as everyone waited to hear what she would say next. "Comedy should make people laugh, not spread lies about private citizens," Leavitt continued. "Mr. Rock claims to have inside sources, but he has provided no evidence to support his allegations. His routine was based on gossip and speculation, not facts." Leavitt then did something that surprised everyone in the room. Instead of just defending the First Family, she went on the offensive against Rock himself. "I challenge Mr. Rock to provide proof of his claims," she said, her voice getting stronger. "If he truly has credible sources, he should name them. If he has evidence to support what he said, he should present it. Otherwise, he should apologize to the First Family for spreading false information." The reporters in the room were frantically taking notes. This was exactly the kind of direct confrontation that would make headlines. Leavitt was not just dismissing Rock's comments. She was challenging him to back them up. "The American people deserve better than gossip disguised as entertainment," Leavitt added. "Public figures and their families should not be subjected to baseless attacks, regardless of their political affiliations." She took a few questions from reporters, but her message was clear. The White House was not going to let Rock's comments go unanswered. They were fighting back, and they were doing it publicly. After the briefing ended, news outlets immediately began analyzing Leavitt's statement. Political experts debated whether her aggressive response was the right strategy. Some praised her for defending the First Family, while others wondered if engaging with Rock would only make the controversy bigger. Within minutes of the briefing ending, clips of Leavitt's challenge to Rock were spreading across social media. The story that had started with a comedy routine was now a full-blown confrontation between a comedian and the White House press secretary. Everyone was waiting to see what Chris Rock would do next. Chris Rock was sitting in his apartment in Manhattan when he watched Karoline Leavitt's primetime press conference on television. He had been expecting some kind of response from the White House, but he was not prepared for such a direct challenge. As he listened to Leavitt demand proof and call for an apology, Rock felt his anger building. The comedian had been in the entertainment business for over 30 years. He had made jokes about presidents, celebrities, and politicians countless times before. Usually, people either laughed or ignored what he said. But this time was different. This time, the White House press secretary was calling him a liar on national television. Rock grabbed his phone and opened Instagram. He had over 15 million followers on the platform, and he knew that whatever he posted would be seen by millions of people within minutes. His hands were shaking slightly as he set up his phone to record a live video. "All right, everybody, we need to talk," Rock said as he started the live stream. Within seconds, viewers began joining the broadcast. The number of people watching climbed rapidly, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, and it kept growing. Rocky was still wearing the casual clothes he had put on that morning. His hair was messy and he looked tired, but his eyes were bright with anger and determination. This was not the polished, prepared Chris Rock that people usually saw on stage or in interviews. This was raw and unfiltered. "So I just watched the White House press secretary on TV," Rock began, pacing around his living room with his phone in his hand. "And apparently I'm a liar now. Apparently I'm spreading false information. Well, let me tell you something, Karoline Leavitt. I've been telling the truth my whole career and I'm not about to stop now." The viewer count continued to climb. 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 people were now watching Rock's live stream. Comments were flooding in faster than anyone could read them. Some people were supporting Rock while others were criticizing him for attacking the First family. "You want proof?" Rock continued, his voice getting louder. "You want me to name my sources? Well, here's the thing about sources. They don't want their names out there because they have jobs to protect. But I can tell you this, I didn't make up what I said on that stage." Rock then began sharing more details about what he claimed to know about the Trump marriage. He talked about stories he said he had heard from people who worked in high-end hotels where the couple had stayed. He mentioned conversations with restaurant staff who had served them. He described what he called insider knowledge about their public appearances. "I know people who have been around them," Rock said, looking directly into the camera. "And let me tell you, what you see in public is not what happens behind closed doors. These people are putting on a show, and everybody in their circle knows it." The comedian was clearly getting more worked up as he spoke. He was gesturing wildly with his free hand and walking back and forth across his apartment. Sweat was starting to form on his forehead despite the cool temperature in the room. "And another thing," Rock continued. "Since when is comedy not allowed to talk about public figures? Since when do comedians have to apologize for making jokes? This is America, right? We still have free speech, don't we?" By this point, over 100,000 people were watching the live stream. The comment section was moving so fast that individual messages were impossible to read. News outlets were already starting to report on what Rock was saying in real time. "Karoline Leavitt wants me to provide evidence," Rock said, stopping his pacing and staring into the camera. "Well, here's my evidence. Use your eyes. Watch how they act together. Look at their body language. Listen to how they talk about each other. If you can't see what I'm talking about, then you're not paying attention." Rock then did something that surprised many of his viewers. He issued his own challenge back to the White House press secretary. "You know what, Karoline? You want to make this a thing? Let's make it a thing. I challenge you to a public debate about the role of comedy in society. Let's talk about whether comedians should be allowed to comment on public figures. Let's discuss the difference between entertainment and journalism. Are you brave enough to have that conversation?" The suggestion of a debate between a comedian and the White House press secretary sent the comment section into a frenzy. People were expressing shock, excitement, and disbelief at Rock's bold proposal. During the live stream, several celebrities joined the broadcast and left comments. Comedian Dave Johnson wrote, "Tell them, Chris, comedy is not censorship." Actress Michelle Stone posted, "This is getting crazy, but I'm here for it." The celebrity attention brought even more viewers to the stream. Rock noticed some of the celebrity comments and acknowledged them during his broadcast. "I see my friends supporting me in the comments," he said, "and I appreciate that, because this isn't just about me anymore. This is about whether entertainers can do their jobs without being attacked by the government." As the live stream continued, Rock revealed more details about his sources. He claimed that several people in Washington had confirmed his suspicions about the Trump marriage over the years. He said these sources included hotel staff, restaurant workers, and even some political insiders. "I'm not the only one who knows this stuff," Rock insisted. "Ask around. Talk to people who actually spend time around these folks. They'll tell you the same things I'm telling you, but they won't say it publicly because they're scared of losing their jobs. The comedian then addressed the criticism he was receiving from some viewers. Many people in the comments were saying he had gone too far and should apologize. Others were defending his right to make jokes about public figures. To all the people saying I should apologize, for what? Rock asked. For doing my job. For making observations about people who chose to live in the public eye. These people ran for president. They put themselves out there. They don't get to hide behind the White House press secretary when someone points out the obvious. Rock spent another 20 minutes on the live stream, answering questions from viewers and defending his original comedy routine. He repeatedly insisted that his comments were based on real information, not just speculation or gossip. By the time Rock ended the live stream, over 2 million people had watched at least part of it. The video had been recorded automatically by Instagram, and clips of it were already being shared across all social media platforms. The comedian's explosive response to Leavitt's challenge had taken the controversy to a completely new level. What had started as a comedy routine was now a full-blown confrontation between a famous entertainer and the White House. Rock had not backed down from his claims. Instead, he had doubled down and issued his own challenge. The entire country was now waiting to see what would happen next in this unprecedented battle between comedy and politics. By the next morning, Chris Rock's live stream had been viewed over 10 million times across all social media platforms. News networks scrambled to get their morning shows on air with coverage of what many were calling the biggest entertainment controversy of the year. The story had grown far beyond what anyone could have imagined just 3 days earlier. At CNN headquarters in Atlanta, political correspondent Jake Miller was preparing for a special segment about celebrity marriages and public scrutiny. Miller had covered Washington politics for 15 years, but he had never seen a story quite like this one. The network had decided to bring in relationship experts to discuss whether Rock's comments were fair game or crossed ethical lines. This is unprecedented, Miller told his producer as they reviewed footage from Rock's Instagram livestream. We have a comedian making specific claims about a presidential marriage, and the White House is fighting back publicly. This isn't just entertainment news anymore. This is political news. Meanwhile, at Fox News Studios in New York, host Laura Kim was taking a completely different approach to the story. Kim had been a supporter of the Trump administration and was planning to use her show to defend the first family's privacy. What we're seeing here is a clear attack on a private marriage, Kim told her viewers during her morning show. Chris Rock has crossed a line from comedy into personal harassment. No family should have to endure this kind of public humiliation, regardless of their political beliefs. The different approaches by major news networks showed how divided the media had become over the controversy. Some outlets treated it as a free speech issue, while others focused on the ethics of attacking personal relationships. Cable news channels were dedicating entire segments to debating Rock's comments and Leavitt's response. Social media platforms were experiencing unprecedented activity related to the story. Twitter users had created dozens of hashtags about the controversy. Some people were using hashtags supporting Rock's right to make jokes, while others were defending the Trump family's privacy. The arguments online were becoming increasingly heated. Tom Wilson, who ran a political polling company in Washington, decided to conduct an emergency survey about public opinion on the controversy. Wilson had been tracking political attitudes for over 20 years, and he was curious to see how Americans were reacting to this unusual situation. The polling results surprised even Wilson. The country was split almost exactly down the middle. 48% of Americans thought Rock had gone too far with his comments, while 47% believed he had the right to make jokes about public figures. The remaining 5% were undecided. I've never seen numbers this close on a celebrity controversy, Wilson told reporters when he released the poll results. Usually there's a clear majority opinion one way or the other. But this story has divided Americans just as much as any political issue. The polling data revealed interesting patterns when broken down by age and political affiliation. Younger Americans were more likely to support Rock's right to make the jokes, while older Americans thought he had crossed a line. Republicans were more likely to criticize Rock, while Democrats were more supportive of his comments. Entertainment industry professionals were also divided about the controversy. Celebrity publicist Nancy Foster, who represented several high-profile clients, was fielding calls all day from reporters wanting to know how other celebrities felt about the situation. "My clients are split on this," Foster admitted during a phone interview with Entertainment Weekly. "Some think Chris went too far, while others believe he was just doing his job as a comedian. What everyone agrees on is that this story has gotten much bigger than anyone expected." Several celebrities had already weighed in publicly on the controversy. Some supported Rock's right to make jokes about public figures, while others criticized him for attacking a marriage. The entertainment industry was becoming as divided as the general public. Legal expert Daniel Gray was making appearances on multiple news shows to discuss whether Rock's comments could lead to a defamation lawsuit. Gray explained that public figures like the Trumps faced a higher legal standard for proving defamation, but he also noted that Rock's specific claims about having insider sources could potentially create legal problems. "The key question is whether Rock's statements constitute opinion or claims of fact," Gray explained during an appearance on a legal news program. "Comedy traditionally gets broad protection under free speech laws, but when a comedian claims to have specific insider information, that could change the legal analysis." The controversy was also affecting the comedy world in unexpected ways. Comedy club owner Frank Rodriguez reported that ticket sales for political comedy shows had increased dramatically since Rock's performance. Audiences seemed eager to hear what other comedians might say about the situation. "Every comedian in the city is talking about this," Rodriguez said from his club in Manhattan. "Some are planning to address it in their acts while others are staying away from the topic completely. But one thing is certain. People are very interested in political comedy right now." The story was dominating social media trending topics for 3 straight days. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok were all flooded with content related to the Rock-Leavitt confrontation. Memes, reaction videos, and opinion posts were being shared millions of times. Young social media influencers were taking sides and encouraging their followers to do the same. Some created videos defending Rock's comedy, while others made content supporting the Trump family. The online debate was spreading to every corner of the internet. Traditional media outlets were struggling to keep up with the speed of the story's development. By the time newspapers printed their analysis of Rock's original comedy routine, he had already responded with his Instagram live stream. By the time evening news shows covered his live stream response, new developments were already happening online. The story was also having unexpected effects on late-night television. Comedy show hosts were unsure how to address the controversy. Some worried that taking sides might hurt their ratings, while others saw it as an opportunity to gain attention. Television talk show producers were frantically trying to book guests related to the story. Everyone wanted to interview Rock or Leavitt, but both were being selective about their media appearances. The demand for interviews was unlike anything producers had seen for an entertainment story. International media outlets were also covering the story, presenting it as an example of American celebrity culture and political divisions. Foreign journalists were particularly interested in the role of comedy in American political discourse. As the controversy entered its 4th day, it showed no signs of slowing down. If anything, the story was gaining momentum as more people became aware of it and took sides. The battle between Chris Rock and Karoline Leavitt had become a national conversation about comedy, politics, privacy, and free speech. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next in this unprecedented clash between entertainment and government. After 5 days of non-stop media coverage, both Chris Rock and Karoline Leavitt agreed to appear on Sunday morning news shows to address the controversy that had captivated the entire nation. The interviews were scheduled for the same morning, but on different networks, ensuring that millions of Americans would tune in to hear what both sides had to say. Rock chose to appear on Meet the Press with host Julie Adams. Adams had been hosting the show for 8 years and was known for asking tough questions while maintaining a professional tone. She understood that this interview could make or break Rock's reputation, depending on how he handled the situation. At the NBC studios in Washington, Rock arrived 30 minutes early, looking more polished than he had during his emotional Instagram live stream. He wore a dark suit and had clearly prepared for the interview. His publicist and lawyer were with him, a sign that he was taking this appearance very seriously. "Chris, you've been in comedy for over 30 years, Adams began once. The cameras started rolling. "Have you ever faced this kind of controversy before?" Rock looked directly at the camera as he answered. "No, Julie, I haven't, but I've also never backed down from telling the truth, and I'm not going to start now. What I said on that stage was based on real information from real people." Adams pressed him for more details about his sources, but Rock remained vague. He insisted that he couldn't name specific people without putting their jobs at risk. However, he did provide more context about the types of conversations he had heard about over the years. "These aren't just random rumors," Rock explained. "These are consistent stories from different people who have interacted with this couple in private settings. When you hear the same things from multiple sources over several years, you start to see a pattern." Meanwhile, across town at CBS Studios, Karoline Leavitt was preparing for her own interview on Face the Nation with host Steve Clark. Clark had been covering Washington politics for 25 years and had interviewed every press secretary since the Clinton administration. Leavitt arrived at the studio with a small team from the White House communications office. She looked confident and well-prepared, wearing a professional blue suit and carrying a folder of notes. Unlike Rock's emotional live stream, she planned to maintain the same calm, authoritative tone she used during press briefings. "Karoline, this controversy has dominated the news cycle for nearly a week," Clark began. "Do you regret challenging Chris Rock so directly?" Leavitt's response was measured and deliberate. "Steve, I don't regret defending the First Family against baseless attacks. It's part of my job to address false information regardless of where it comes from. Mr. Rock made specific claims without providing any evidence to support them." Clark asked whether the White House was considering legal action against Rock. Leavitt avoided giving a direct answer, saying only that all options were being considered and that the administration would continue to defend itself against what she called unfounded attacks. Both interviews were broadcast live with millions of Americans watching to see if either Rock or Leavitt would back down from their positions. Social media was buzzing with real-time reactions as viewers shared their thoughts about each interview. The interviews revealed that neither side was willing to compromise. Rock maintained that his comedy routine was based on legitimate information, while Leavitt continued to demand proof of his claims. The standoff seemed likely to continue indefinitely. However, by the following week, other news events began to overshadow the Rock-Leavitt controversy. A major economic announcement from the Federal Reserve and developing international tensions started to dominate news cycles. The entertainment story that had consumed the nation's attention for nearly a week was gradually pushed to the background. Despite fading from the headlines, the controversy had lasting effects on multiple aspects of American culture and politics. Comedy club owner Frank Rodriguez noticed that political comedy shows continued to sell out weeks after the initial controversy. The Rock situation opened up a whole new conversation about what comedians can and can't say, Rodriguez observed. Audiences are more interested in political humor now, but they're also more sensitive about where the line should be drawn. The entertainment industry as a whole was affected by the controversy. Celebrity publicist Nancy Foster reported that her clients were being more careful about their public statements, knowing that any comment could potentially escalate into a major news story. "Everyone learned from what happened to Chris," Foster explained. Celebrities are realizing that in today's media environment, even comedy routines can become political controversies. People are being more thoughtful about their public appearances. The White House also made changes to how it handled celebrity criticism. Press secretary protocols were updated to provide clearer guidelines for responding to entertainment industry controversies. Mary Johnson, a veteran of 3 previous administrations, noted that the Rock situation had created new precedents for White House communications. Previous administrations generally ignored celebrity criticism, Johnson explained. But this situation showed that sometimes ignoring controversial statements can allow them to grow into bigger problems. The challenge is knowing when to respond and when to stay silent. Political strategist Paul Davis wrote extensively about the controversy in his weekly column, analyzing how it reflected broader divisions in American society. Davis argued that the Rock-Leavitt confrontation revealed deep disagreements about the role of entertainment in political discourse. This wasn't really about one comedian's jokes, Davis wrote. It was about fundamental questions of free speech, privacy, and the relationship between entertainment and politics. These are issues that won't be resolved anytime soon. Media consultant Helen Wright focused on how the controversy demonstrated the power of social media to amplify entertainment. Stories into national conversations. Wright noted that Rock's Instagram livestream had been more influential than traditional media coverage in shaping public opinion. The old model of celebrity controversies playing out in magazines and talk shows is dead, Wright explained. Now, celebrities can speak directly to millions of people instantly. That power comes with new responsibilities and new risks. The controversy also influenced how comedy venues approached political material. Many clubs began providing clearer guidelines to performers about potentially controversial topics. Some comedians embraced the new attention on political humor, while others decided to avoid political material altogether. Universities began incorporating the Rock-Leavitt controversy into communications and media studies courses as an example of how entertainment and politics intersect in the digital age. Students analyzed the different strategies used by both sides and debated the ethical implications of the situation. 6 months after the original controversy, both Rock and Leavitt had moved on to other projects and challenges. Rock continued, touring with his comedy shows, occasionally referencing the controversy but no longer making it a central part of his act. Leavitt remained in her role as press secretary, handling new controversies and challenges that arose in the political world. The lasting impact of their confrontation could be seen in how similar situations were handled afterward, when other comedians made controversial statements about political figures. Both entertainers and government officials seemed more aware of how quickly such situations could escalate. The Rock-Leavitt controversy had become a case study in modern American culture, demonstrating how entertainment, politics, and social media could combine to create national conversations that neither side had anticipated or fully controlled.